Am I living the values that I believe we have to, am I living the values that I believe? We have to look at it each day. We're starting that over. We have to look at it as if each day is a new day. We now conclude with our 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit 7, and then a few concluding remarks about the overall process and a few supporting ideas that go along with sharpening the saw. If we don't renew our values, they can become stale. Our feelings about our values tend to wax and wane. They might have great meaning at a particular point because maybe we've had a big trying or uplifting experience at that point. We live them willingly and spontaneously with great commitment over time. However, those feelings can fade. We might find that our understanding and appreciation of our values have diminished. We have to continually ask ourselves, am I living the values that I believe? We have to look at it is each day heading me towards the future I envision, so that we make sure that we don't get sidetracked and doing what we're doing things that aren't really in alignment with our values at times, and we need to check on that. There's a difference between positive attitude and proactivity. If you're really effective, it's just a part of your life. You're pretty much going to have a positive attitude. So a lot of times people associate positive attitudes with being proactive and kind of decides the same thing. But really having a positive attitude comes from practicing these 7 habits, having a clear mind, a clear mission, and living in integrity to our values. So having a positive attitude and effectiveness can be to have the effects of the same cause. They're not a cause and effect. In other words, having a mission statement and living in congruence with it can give us a positive attitude, but it's not all. The positive attitude isn't why we're doing it. The productivity is why we're doing it. The productivity is why we're doing it. And stress. Stress comes mainly from reactive living. When we looked at chapter 1 in the strategic management text, we talk about strategy, and that's reaction. That's how life is too most of the time. If we're trying to be effective and we're living in intentional alignment with our goals, we can be proactive. However, sometimes things happen, things that are outside of our control because there's a job. Our faculty lose their job, or we could get sick, or children get sick, or we could get something could happen in our lives. When they happen, we're going to have stress. So stress affects us negatively. So we know that. And when we try and handle them without following our values, then it's even worse. So if we can meet our stressful circumstances proactively, where we can practice living in congruence with our lives, then while those successful things happen, we don't have to live reactively and let that mounting stress derail us. We can use what we've learned and how we live most of our life to have less stress. Because we're healthy, we're active, we're used to challenging ordeals. So that's the last habit. I hope you've enjoyed and learned from the time we've spent on this material. I'd like to close the video with 2 things. I'm going to read some closing pages of Dr. Covey's book, where he talks about achieving unity, oneness with ourselves, with our loved ones, with our friends and working associates. It's the highest and best, most delicious fruit of the 7 habits. Most of us have tasted this fruit of true unity from time to time in the past, as we have also tasted the bitter, lonely fruit of this unity. And we know how precious and fragile unity is, obviously, building a character of total integrity and living the life of love and service that creates such unity. It isn't a quick fix, but it is possible. It begins with a desire to center our lives on correct principles, to break out the paradigm created by other centers and the comfort zones of unworthy habits. Sometimes we make mistakes. We feel ourselves feeling awkward. But if we start with a daily private victory and work from the inside out, these results will surely come. As we plant the seed and patiently weed and nourish it, we begin to feel the excitement, real growth, and eventually taste the incomparably delicious roots of a congruent, affected life. Again, I quote Emerson, that which we persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the nature of the task has changed, but our ability to do the task has increased. By centering our lives on correct principles and creating a balanced focus between doing and increasing our ability to do so, we become empowered in the task of living, um, uh, the task of creating effective, useful, and peaceful lives for ourselves and our posterity. So the last thing I'm going to share is something I shared in week one, or the first habit, or actually the first overview of the 7 habits. This is the 7 habits paradigm, and you can see a lot um, in this paradigm, but it brings all 7 habits back together now that you've worked through all 7 of them. You can see that when you go through all these different pieces, starting at the bottom, you have dependence, which grows into independence and ultimately becomes interdependence. It's part of the maturity continuum. But first let's look at the habits themselves. Starting down here on the bottom, the first habit was be proactive. The second habit began with the end in mind. And the third habit, put first things first. Habits 1, 2, and 3 lead to private victories, the victories that allow us to achieve self-mastery and domination over self being proactive. This is what we look at when we look at the fact that we are free to choose. And secondly, habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is when we identify what is our personal mission and our goals. Why are we here? Habit 3 is to put first things first, in which we act on our priorities. We looked at what we want to do at the end of life, and we're going to set that up and make sure that we're doing things that lead us to that destination that we want. Then we move to habit 4, 5, and 6. And these are public victories. These are the victories that allow us to achieve success or effectiveness with other people. Habit 4, think win-win, is where we look for alternatives that allow everyone to win. That's not really an easy thing, like everyone should get a trophy. This is everyone wins. We find mutually satisfying outcomes in our interactions with people. Habit 5 is to seek first to understand. This is both an attitude and a skill, and listening deeply for complete understanding. Habit 6 is synergy, in which we discover creativity that people can experience when they explore their differences together. And if we circle around the outside of this diagram, we see habit 7 is sharpening the saw. This is the habit that calls the others forth. It's our simple daily activities that implant the principles of effectiveness in our minds and habits. These habits form a continuum because the private victory must come before the public. Until we've developed self-mastery, it's difficult, if not impossible, to achieve success with other people. Taken together, the 7 habits cultivate personal character, which is the foundation of effectiveness. And with that, we conclude the 7 habits of highly effective people. Thank you.